"After them," yelled Gemma. The pack of cottontail rabbits had cleared the beach and hurried into the desert. Milo grabbed the sack off the sandy shore and handed it to Gemma. They followed after the rabbits, kicking up swirls of sand like a tornado in a field of flowers. Running with all the speed they could muster, Gemma and Milo kept up for the better part of an hour. Under the blistering sun, it was getting harder and harder to keep up their pace. The rabbits, it seemed, were a bit more adept than them at desert sprints, whether they wanted to admit it or not. As the sun hit the middle of the sky, the chase brought them all to a small desert oasis with palm trees, green plants, and a small freshwater pond. "Am I seeing things, Milo?" asked Gemma, out of breath and so hot that her hair seemed to be sweating. Milo's wide eyes and drooling grin told her that she wasn't. "No time to stop," she panted. "We need to catch those rabbits." Milo let out a disappointed squeak, but pressed on. The rabbits tore through the oasis without a second thought and continued onto large dunes. When Gemma and Milo took the same path and came to the top of a dune, the rabbits were gone. All they saw were row upon row of sand dunes. "They could have gone anywhere," said Gemma. "Those dunes make it impossible to see." Milo raised his finger to make a point and then flopped back onto the sand. "Milo, are you okay?" she asked. Milo didn't answer. "Do you want to go to the oasis?" she asked. Milo didn't move. "Do you want me to carry you to the oasis?" she asked. Milo lifted his head and nodded with a smile. Gemma picked him up and they made their way back down the dune, straight towards the oasis pond. The shade from the palm trees gave them immediate relief from the sun overhead as they laid down by the pond next to each other. There were a dozen bushes and patches of uneven grass around the rim of the water. It felt cool and soft beneath their heads. It was the first moment of rest they'd had since waking up, and it felt better than good and gooder than great to not be running. "How are we going to catch those rabbits?" Gemma asked. Instead of answering, Milo rolled over into the pond and slurped up as much water as he could. "Yeah, I guess we can figure it out tomorrow," she said. But Milo didn't hear her because he was busy doing the backstroke. That night, under a sky filled with stars, they sat around a new fire and got ready for sleep. The water had rejuvenated them, but their food supply was dwindling after the rambunctious rabbits had robbed them. This night's feast was smaller than the last, but they were happy to have it. As Milo chewed on a licorice stick, Gemma laid her head on a particularly comfortable patch of onion grass. "So, what do you really think the most greatest treasure in the world will be?" she asked him. Milo hopped up and twirled his fingers around his tail from top to bottom with a series of squeaks. "It is not a diamond tail spiral, Milo." "Not everything has to do with your tail," she replied. Milo chuckled to himself and laid down next to her. They stared up at the night sky and got lost in the sparkling patterns above them. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" she said. Milo nodded happily. "They remind me of the night before my parents left. My mom took me to a waterfall and..." Gemma was interrupted by Milo's snoring. She glanced over and saw him, fast asleep. "Good night, Milo," she finished. The next morning, they were woken again by the herd of cottontails. Exhausted from a day of pursuit, Gemma and Milo had slept all the way through to midday. The rabbits headed straight through the oasis, as they had before. By the time Gemma opened her eyes and realized it, it was too late. Gemma had left their food out again, and the rabbits were devouring it as they passed. "No, shoo. Get out of here," she yelled, sitting up and reaching towards them. They were gone before she got to her feet. Gemma grabbed her bag and ran to the top of the dune. Just like before, the rabbits were gone. More gone even. It had taken Gemma longer to climb the dune, in her sleepy state. Milo had, impressively, not even woken up. "They're gone again," she said, as Milo rubbed his eyes open. "And they took the food we left out." Milo scrambled to the backpack and crawled inside to look through. He came back out with a frown. "I know," she said. "All we have left is some bread for licorice sticks, a coconut, and those spices that make you..." Gemma stopped. "Milo, I think I have an idea. Tomorrow, when they come back, you and I are going to be ready," she said with a grin. Milo grinned too, not because he knew the plan, but because he liked when Gemma grinned. Under the moonlight on the third night, Gemma and Milo laid down to sleep. "We'll need to rest up if my plan is going to work," she said, fixing her pillow of onion grass. Milo snuggled up to a soft bush and got cozy. "So, one last try. What do you think the most greatest treasure in the world is?" Milo hopped up even more excited than before. He swung his tail around like a lasso, hopped on both feet, pointed to the sky, then back at his tail, wrapped it around his leg, then danced a jig. "Milo, that's actually okay, that would be pretty amazing." Milo laid down and fell asleep with a smile on his face. When midday came, Gemma and Milo had packed their bag, drank lots of water, and were waiting in the center of the oasis. Bits and chunks of bread were spread out on the ground in front of them. The cottontail rabbits came over the horizon and headed right for their camp. "Here we go, Milo. I hope this works." The rabbits ran over their camp just as they had each day before. And they ate all the food just as they had the each day before. When they headed up the dune, with Gemma and Milo chasing them, there was not a speck of bread left. At the top of the dune, Gemma looked around and, once again, saw only sand. Milo looked to her, but she held up her hand. They stood, waiting. Nothing happened. Come on, she whispered. And that's when a puff of sand shot up on the other side of a dune to their left. And then another. "There," she said, pointing. They ran off in the direction of the sand puffs. As they came to the top of the next dune, they looked around again. Another puff from a different dune. "It's working," yelled Gemma. "The spices on that bread are making them sneeze, just like you, Milo." Gemma and Milo ran up and down dunes all afternoon, never losing track of the rabbits and their sandy sneezes. Then, to their surprise, the puffs of sand stopped moving. They all came from the same place, on the other side of a tall dune. When Gemma and Milo reached the top, they looked down over a group of sleeping, sneezing cottontail rabbits, curled up together. They were lying at the foot of a dirt path that stretched through a few trees, then on into a deep, dark forest.